Hello, everyone. Kelley Hatlee here with Macoupin County 5051 and Indivisible. I am joined this morning by U.S. Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski. Nikki, thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. It's great to be with you.
One of the things our organization encourages people to do is to run for local office. So tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us what motivated you to run not just for local office, but for Congress.
Sure. Well, I have had the privilege of working for a lot of great elected officials. Prior to me running for office, I helped to elect our governor, Governor Pritzker. Also worked as the chief of staff at the Office of Management and Budget under President Biden. And really, after graduating from college at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, I found myself in public service. And I really very much believe in there are a variety of different ways that we can all give back through public service, either at the staff level or you can decide to run for office like I did. But my path to running to elected office really led through working at the state and the federal level of government, but also in a lot of political campaigns. Like I said, helping to elect some other great people to public office. It wasn't until really after COVID, Kelly, that I thought about myself as trying to do something different, something I've never done before, which was to step forward and put my own name on the ballot. And when I served in the White House and under President Biden, kind of seeing the American Rescue Plan, moving some of those resources into communities that for so long had been kind of overlooked and were struggling to get their footing after COVID, I really was inspired by what he was trying to do both through the American Rescue Plan, but through some really big investments like infrastructure, like investing in the clean energy economy. Those kind of things I thought I wanted to go back home to central Illinois and decide to run myself and be a part of the solution, be a part of bringing back those federal dollars, making our community stronger coming out of COVID. And so here I am.
Awesome. Now, I know something else that you've been involved with is you have a history of supporting the labor movement. So
I
here with
do.
Macoupin County 5051 and Indivisible, we just hosted our Workers Over Billionaires rally as
Yep.
part of the National Day of Action on Labor Day. Why is the labor movement such an important fight for you, and what have you done under the Trump administration to stand up for organized labor?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a really important question right now. Aside from, as I said, serving in public service and state and federal government roles, I did work in the labor movement for 10 years. I worked for the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. I also worked for the Firefighters Union. And that experience over the course of that 10 years has really grounded the work that I now do in Congress, working to help working families and helping to support them in the everyday struggles that they have, putting food on their table, helping to afford insurance, helping to afford prescription drug costs. And working people are under a full out assault, I think, right now. President Trump was elected in 2024, I think with the false promise that he was going to help working people. And in fact, he's done nothing but the opposite. I'm very big believer in collective bargaining, which is really the rights of workers to come together to negotiate for good wages, benefits, and safe working conditions. He's eliminated collective bargaining rights for workers at the public sector, at the federal level, at the EPA, at the VA. I serve on the House Veterans Affairs Committee and work very closely with the employees at the VA. And their collective bargaining agreement not just benefits and makes sure that they have good wages and benefits, but supports our veterans and the good services that they get out at the VA. And so, what we're seeing is an assault on collective bargaining, but what we're also seeing is an assault on our public services. One of the things I've really tried to champion at home is being an advocate for the United States Postal Service. I know in places, all of our communities in Macoupin County, without that connection to the USPS, a lot of small businesses will struggle. Seniors that are relying on time mail delivery to get their prescription drugs will struggle. So I've been fighting to protect our public services that have really also been under assault in this administration. I mentioned the USPS, but something that's very near and dear to me is supporting public education. I have a nephew that has special needs. He's 15 years old now, has Down syndrome. But because of public education and specifically IDEA funding that comes out of the Department of Education, he gets the opportunity that every other kid gets in a public school setting. And so, one of the things I'm very concerned about for working families is what those types of federal resources getting cut is going to mean for people in their everyday lives. And then we can spend a little bit of time. I know we might be talking more about the big ugly bill as I refer to it, but really, when you're doing, putting people over billionaires, that's the opposite actually of what the Trump administration did with the big ugly bill. Big permanent tax breaks to the top 1%, while not providing that same permanent tax relief to working class families, middle class families. And at the same time, in this bill, seeing these really deep cuts to Medicaid. So, all of these really, I think, specific examples are going to touch the lives of the working people that I represent in the 13th Congressional District, and why the work I did in the labor movement really grounds me in organizing to defend those workers' rights, but to also defend the services that working people have come to rely on.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you for touching on the big beautiful bill because I know that's something that is weighing on a lot of people's minds. They're very concerned
Yeah.
about it. Can you talk a little bit more in detail about how that's going to impact the people, friends, neighbors, family right here at home in Illinois?
Yeah, I am very disturbed and incredibly anxious. And I think in being home during the month of August and visiting with constituents throughout the district, I know everyone else is too. With what happened out of the big ugly bill, oftentimes referred to as also reconciliation, there was almost $900 billion of cuts to Medicaid. We know that in the state of Illinois, since that bill went through and those deep, deep cuts to Medicaid happened, we know that 11 rural hospitals are going to be on the watch list for potential closure. That is going to impact some of the most rural parts like Macoupin County in the 13th Congressional District. I'm very concerned about that. I'm very concerned about the onerous requirements, and they're really paperwork requirements, the burden that they're putting on working people that don't exist today, that are going to exist now that this bill has passed. I met a woman, her daughter has a disability. Because of Medicaid, her disabled child qualifies for health care through Medicaid. She has to already apply for a redesignation every year to make sure that her daughter is still enrolled in the program. What Republicans did, not just cutting Medicaid dollars, but made it more difficult for this mother to actually access the program by saying to her, now we need you to apply twice. I mean, it's really needless paperwork and bureaucracy requirements that are intended to make it more difficult for working people to access the very programs that are going to be able to ensure they get access to health care. So it is about the cuts. It is about more paperwork requirements. As you know, Kelley, I also serve on the House Agriculture Committee, $187 billion of cuts to SNAP. I visit a lot of the food banks in the district, and I can tell you right now, what I don't hear from food banks is they have too much food and they don't know what to do with it. What they tell me is that there is an increase in need, that families are going hungry, the children are showing up to school hungry. And when you see these deep cuts, which haven't even gone into effect yet, we know that these problems are only going to get worse in the 13th Congressional District. And so I am doing everything I can. I've signed on in Congress to legislation to repeal these aspects of the big ugly bill. And I think that's what's at stake in this next election is electing a new House Democratic majority that's going to look at the disaster of this big ugly bill and repeal some of these efforts. Fight to make sure that we're shoring up our Medicaid dollars. We're investing in food security and not creating more food insecurity. I think that's very critical and why this upcoming election is going to be so important. If I can lastly just mention maybe one other thing that is going to be coming, I think people are going to be getting notices in their mailboxes soon, is the ACA premium tax credits. Republicans had an opportunity to extend them. They expire in January. I have about 14,000 people in the 13th Congressional District that take advantage of those tax credits. When they expire, people are going to see on average about $1,000 increase in their premiums on an annual basis. Notices are going to go to these 14,000 households in October. We have an opportunity to extend them. Republicans could have done this in the big ugly bill, but again, they left healthcare out there just to give more tax breaks to the 1%. So I'll stop there. I could go on and on,
I
Kelley,
know.
about how bad this bill is, but those are kind of the things that are top of mind for me.
Yeah, I know. We could probably talk for days about all the things happening right now.
Yeah,
Yeah, and what is sad right now with these cuts is, first of all, it's going to affect everyone, but it's going to have the biggest impact on those who need these services the most,
absolutely.
and also that billionaires can have a tax break, right?
It makes no sense.
Yeah. So speaking of all these things going on, I know that a lot of people are very scared right now. There's a lot of
Yeah.
anxiety, and a lot of people are looking for ways. They're looking for an outlet. I've heard from a lot of people about this. So what can folks do ahead of 2026 to fight back and to feel like
Hmm.
they're doing something to contribute?
Yeah, well, first of all, I know in Macoupin County, we've got folks showing up at the courthouse. People are active, people are paying attention. I think that's one of the most important things is to really get informed. And by informing yourself, I mean not just get all your news on social media, but actually take the time to follow what's happening in Washington. I think that is critically important. Second, I would just say is I've been saying this, and I think it's really important, is one of the things I think that concerns me the most during this difficult time is that it feels like we've lost this sense of community. I think that we need to just acknowledge that we're going to have neighbors and friends that are going to be struggling for the first time in a very long time, and they might need some additional help. And so, making a difference in this world, yes, it is about marching. Yes, it is about protesting. Yes, it certainly is about getting out to vote. But I think it is also checking on our friends and neighbors. And I say that because I do think that there are going to be seniors living on fixed incomes that have been reliant on SNAP funding, that funding might not be there and they might just need a little extra help. And so I think checking on our folks, checking on our neighbors, the kids, childcare is something that is a very broken system in this country. And with rising costs, parents are going to be making these really difficult decisions between, can I still afford childcare to get to work while also affording groceries? Just checking on our families in the neighborhood. I think that's just really, really important. But it is ultimately our first big step toward accountability with the Trump administration is clearly taking back the House of Representatives in 2026. We have a very narrow minority. When we get into the majority, we have a lot more opportunities and tools at our disposal that we just quite frankly don't have now. The ability to investigate, the ability to repeal some of these really bad parts of the big ugly bill that we don't like. We get to control the floor and the issues that are brought to the floor and making sure that those issues are resonant and important to working people, not some of the nonsense that I have to vote on the floor on a pretty regular basis. So it is just that important. And I just want to underscore that if the Republicans were winning on the issues, they wouldn't be trying to cheat and steal like they're doing in Texas with
Right.
this mid-decade redistricting that they're doing, trying to steal 5 seats. If you're winning on the issues, if you're really tackling affordability for working people, you don't have to do that. So we got to be very vigilant and we have to be engaged, informed, and just don't forget to check on our neighbors.
Yeah, and you can already see it in some of the special elections around the country. You can see a
Yeah.
resurgence of democracy supporting candidates winning. And yeah, and thank you for bringing up too the community building and the mutual aid and getting involved in campaigns. That's actually, and I'm mentioning this, I'm going to give a little plug for Macoupin County 5051 and Indivisible here for people who don't know, because I know the protests are very visible. People see
Hmm.
those, but what they may not realize is that behind the scenes too, we are also having community resistance gatherings every couple of weeks. Um, Food drives and mutual aid is something that's being talked about on a
Great.
national level. And also here in Macoupin County, too, we're also encouraging people to get involved with Macoupin County Democrats and to help local and state and national campaigns to get involved so we can take back our democracy in 2026. Um, So I know that you have done a lot for the people of Illinois, and thank you for that. Um,
Sure.
in closing, what is something you're most proud of accomplishing during your
Mhm.
time in Congress?
Well, if I could highlight two things, I mean, first and foremost, it's bringing back the federal resources to our communities for the projects that are needed the most. Um, Projects in Staunton, in particular, projects in Gillespie, projects in Carlinville, helping, help to purchase for the MCDD a whole new building in Carlinville for those young people. Those are the kind of things that have only been made possible. Water infrastructure investments in Staunton. Those kind of projects make a difference in people's everyday lives. And in my first year in office, I was able to be the top Democrat to bring back the most federal dollars to my district. And I think that's really important because I think it just shows the communities and my constituents that I'm working to deliver for them, even in a very difficult political environment, that we're able to make good on some of the priorities that they have shared with me and bring those dollars back home. The second thing I would just say is I was able to successfully, in the President Biden's administration, be able to advocate for the designation of the 1908 race riot in Springfield to become a national park. This is something that my predecessor had been working on. A lot of elected officials prior, Senator Duckworth was a big champion of this, but I was able to advocate to the president to get him to utilize the Antiquities Act to make it a reality for the community of Springfield. And I think it's so important that we tell our complete history of this country, the good parts and certainly the bad parts, so that we don't repeat them. And so I think being able to be a part of that was something that was incredibly special to me.
Yeah. Yeah, this country was built because of everyone, right? Everyone
That's
needs to have
right.
their story heard. Yep.
That's right.
Well, Nikki, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for
Thanks,
everything
Kelley.
you've done for Illinois and for the people of Macoupin County.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate this. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.